place. The same nightmare, as he considers it, keeps happening for days on end, even after drinking more than enough alcohol to ease his PTSD, and always with some distorted voice that he can never locate. God damn. It's getting cold. Time is actually. Okay. Enough. Along with this, he starts having very creepy sensations throughout his body, completely at random, almost like his legs are being pulled towards a certain spot outside without him at all wanting to go. It gets so bad that Eric has to give in and let his feet take him to their desire. And every time he gets to a point where the feeling is strongest, nothing around seems to be what's pulling his bones closer. After a few more times of this, he finally discovers that the sensation he's been getting is actually drawing him towards somewhere up in the sky, as if his body wants him to physically take flight and ascend into space. Nathanda is quite concerned for him, as he becomes more aggravated, especially when heavily drunk, and his mental health seems to be getting increasingly unstable with each passing day. They sit down to talk about it, and Eric can't explain what's going on in the slightest. He's just as disturbed as Nathanda and extremely scared by everything that's happening, wondering if the alcohol is now damaging his brain in some way. Though neither of them have heard of these symptoms coming from booze or excessive alcohol intake. Before going to sleep, he decides to practice a bit on the viola instead of drinking, so that his nerves might calm down in a healthier way. However, once he picks it up, something terrifying occurs within him. Eric finds that he knows how to perfectly play the instrument off by heart from just a single touch of its strings, as if knowledge from all varieties of renowned musicians had been transported into his mind by some supernatural force. He slowly dances around his room in a waltzing motion while playing louder than ever before, in an almost trance-like state, performing songs that he never even learnt or heard in his life. The family comes in to check on him and are shocked by what they see. When his dancing moves to the room's open window, he notices Kazia staring at him in sheer amazement from down below, completely transfixed by the music. She then just simply smiles at him and walks away. Pretty soon, the entire farm begins descending into chaos, causing the place to become shunned by locals in the surrounding area, all of which are still in quarantine. One day, everyone on the property wakes up to see an unbelievable array of bizarre and unnaturally colored smoke forming in the air, seeping out from cracks along the meteor's surface, with that disgusting smell being even stronger. More hazmat suits are quickly brought in. None of the scientists have ever seen anything like it before, and the federal agents immediately put tighter restrictions on all things entering and exiting the premises. From there on, the strange colors only grow thicker throughout the property, which sends the family's and Eric's stress levels absolutely haywire, afraid of what might happen if the outside air becomes deadly to breathe. Along with this, many on-site personnel start reporting feeling very hungry all the time, with only minimum relief from eating food or drinking liquid, as well as describing every meal to be extremely delicious, each bite/chug tasting better than the last. In the night, Eric's dreams become unbearably intense, with even more heinous-looking landscapes full of giant, petrifying creatures, and the now audible voice repeating an unfamiliar word in his ears, Azathoth, to a point where he fears falling asleep. They're all eventually given strict instructions to not leave the house at any time without permission from authorities, and to report any strange symptoms or behaviors amongst themselves right away. Eric and Nathanda try going over some basic skills they've learned from lockdown situations back during military training in an attempt to keep everybody calm. But they are all beyond mentally strained by this point, so it doesn't do much good. Disturbingly, the entire family soon begin having the strange hungry feeling in their stomachs and aren't able to find any food that will quench it. Eric, however, is the only person in the house who hasn't gotten it yet, being more than satisfied after eating every time. Some some of the scientists, also experiencing the intense hunger, start coming over for regular checkups on the seven of them. Kazia also frequently drops by for some tests as well, where they find that both her and Eric seem to be the only people on the property who don't have any mysterious symptoms, which is extremely puzzling because they've been equally exposed to the meteor's gas. As more time passes, fear and delirium quickly overtake all of the farmland. Eric's mind begins drifting into insanity, with the voices from his dreams now echoing nonstop, whispering ancient cosmic secrets to him. The family's hunger turns excruciatingly painful as they slowly become thinner than decaying corpses. Many on-site personnel become so crazed by starvation that they attempt to eat the barn animals, also starving, alive. Vegetation quickly starts dying off at every part of the property. Communication with the outside world eventually ceases, all whilst the dreadful creature continues sucking the life out of everything from within its rocky incubator, preparing the young musician's soul. I need to change that because I don't believe in a soul consciousness, I guess I'll say. Preparing the young musician's conscious essence to lull the blind idiot one himself for eternity. Settings: Rubavu, Rwanda; Linz, Austria; Yamoussoukro, Ivory Coast; Abidjan, Ivory Coast; Swakopmund, Namibia; the Botswanan countryside; Mashoro, Botswana, the Botswanan countryside; Sirowe, Botswana; Francistown, Botswana; Linz, Austria. Year settings: 1994, 1996, 2019. The Color Out of Space, adapted from The Color Out of Space, and The Dreams in the Witch House by H.P. Lovecraft. Languages of the game: German. I'm going to include some bits of Swahili, Kenyan in there as well, and languages of, I forget the name of it, starts with Exoa, it starts with an X, and there's another one that starts with a T that I'm going to include in there. West African French as well, and West Central African Portuguese, or Portuguese. Gotta go faster. Oh good, we're on the last two. Okay. The Shadow Out of Time. 16th game. Story. 32-year-old Nitza Perales, Nicaraguan, had been making a good living for herself as a private investigator based in the suburbs of Managua after dropping out of high school midway through. Ever since she was a child, Nitza wanted to be a detective as her career someday, and help the police solve cold case crimes, as they piqued her interest the most, which her parents always humored in response, but didn't actually think would come true. However, she was determined to go into some form of social justice work, and began researching about it whenever possible. Her passion to help people seeking answers for unsolved mysteries only grew as more time passed. So much so that at the prime of her teenhood, she decided to leave school and try pursuing a freelance job in criminal investigations, not wanting to be held back by any corrupt officers and/or politicians in the nationally organized law enforcement. At first, her parents weren't going to allow it, as they thought she was way too young and didn't want her getting hurt. But after many long and tearful arguments, finally gave in to Nitz's demands, convincing them of the good she'd be doing out in the real world instead of wasting her time on education that was borderline useless to her. She soon created her own website and signed up to have her services advertised in different local newspapers with money she had earned from working at her uncle's grain mill over the years alongside other small jobs, using their family housing garage as her office to meet with clients. Eventually, much to her parents' surprise, her business actually started to take off, slowly gaining more recognition over time. As her cases became more threatening, she began carrying heavier weaponry, first a switchblade knife, then a long-range taser, and finally acquiring legal rights to use a small handgun. As the years passed, Nitz's popularity in the local area kept on growing, especially with the Managua Police Department, to a point where she had earned enough money to move out of her parents' house and start living completely on her own. In recent times, Nitsa had been keeping busy with a slew of new cases, working herself tirelessly on a possible small cocaine ring in the city, 5 missing infant reports, some of many that had been occurring nationwide, a stolen car report, a rape assault on a young woman, and a rape assault on a young woman. She'd also been doing a lot of in-depth interviews with different journalists about her success story, which was becoming quite well known throughout the country, and key events from her personal life that fueled her want to become a detective. This all changed, however, when at random, Nitsa suddenly falls unconscious whilst out trying to gather more evidence for the cocaine ring case, and enters a very bizarre dream of complete darkness accompanied by strange voices, making noises that didn't even sound human. As you can tell, there's a bit of a pattern with the noises that I am mentioning here, or that's taken from Lovecraft's own source material. He has a theme, if you'll notice, with things. The last thing she hears being repeated to her before waking up was what almost seemed like a sentence in an unfamiliar language. Vingwali mifluan kathura riya wignaga fatagan. Then jolting back to consciousness with a cold sweat and all her nerves tingling. She attempts to calm herself down for a minute, but Nitsa quickly comes back upon realizing that she hasn't woken up in her own house and doesn't even recognize the neighborhood after looking outside a window, which has a clear view of what appears to be an ocean. All this has her extremely freaked out, though she keeps it contained for the most part and begins searching the strange house for anything or anyone that can explain what happened, particularly on where exactly she is. Upon inspection, the house seems to be of a very old design, mid-colonial era type, with an assortment of different European architecture styles mixed together, and is far bigger than her own home. After thoroughly searching the place for anything that can help her, Nitsa finally finds a journal containing both her parents' phone numbers along with their home phone and address, as well as numbers belonging to acquaintances of hers, plus some random numbers matched to names that she doesn't recognize at all. She manages to locate her own phone in one of the upstairs rooms and calls her parents for any possible help with finding out what happened to her, hoping that they might also have an idea of where she is. They pick up after a few rings, and she quickly but calmly attempts to explain everything going on, mostly waking up mostly waking up in a strange house and it being somewhere that doesn't look like Managua. Nitsa's parents are extremely confused as she continuously tries to make them understand what she's talking about, and eventually her rambling seems to get through, but not in the way that she was hoping. They tell her, or more so remind her, she hasn't lived in Managua for at least 9 years, having moved to the east coast of the country because of better work opportunities, and the house most likely being her own current residence in Braboca, the second biggest city in Nicaragua, from the description of it. This completely dumbfounds Nitsa and scares her even more. Not only was that impossible because she knew if it was something like falling into a coma or catalepsy, which was highly unlikely as her entire body was in almost perfect health. The symptoms of waking up would have come on immediately. But she'd definitely be in a hospital right now, as someone would have found her blacked out in Managua, not Braboca. She keeps insisting that what they're saying can't be true, and quickly starts getting very angry with them, knowing full well there's no possible way for her to have spontaneously lost all memory of the supposed past 9 years. But her parents keep insisting that everything they're saying is true, getting them to become extremely worried about her mental health. After a long while of persisting, Nitsa finally calms down a bit, as upon walking around the house more, does indeed find many of her own belongings from her home in Managua, and starts to think her parents might actually be telling the truth. This internally scares her beyond belief, as she does not remember any of this happening whatsoever. Now worried that she could be suffering from some form of amnesia that just completely wiped out the past 9 years from her mind. She asked her parents if they could possibly come to stay in Braboca for a while to help clear up some more things, and also to have their comforting presence around. With her now being immensely terrified, they agreed to visit, but say it will have to be during their time off, which won't be for another 2 months at least. So in the meantime, her mother suggests that she go find her closest friends in the city. She doesn't at all remember knowing a single person in Braboca, and asks her parents if they could tell her their names, along with any information that she previously said about them. They list as many people from off the top of their heads as possible: Aldrich, Dorian, Begdana, Ilua, Iliu, I think it's pronounced Iliu, Elith, and Miss Urbina, one of her next door neighbors. Oh God, freezing. One of her next door neighbors are the first to come to mind. Then some man on her street named Alfredo. They've heard mentioned a few times, along with a certain librarian whose name they can't remember, but know she's talked about more than once. Unfortunately, though, that's all they can recall. Nitsa thanks her parents for helping, though it was only minimal, even if she still can't quite believe having lost almost a decade's worth of memories, but makes them promise that they'll come visit as soon as possible to give her a better sense of safety, and also just to see their loving faces, which they do without hesitation. After hanging up the phone, she takes another look at the journal and sees the first 4 names her parents mentioned by some of the numbers. She attempts calling the person named Aliath first to find out who they are, how they know her, and if they can help in any way. The person picks up after a few rings, with the voice sounding like a woman, and she begins explaining everything that's happened in hopes that they'll understand, so the two of them can get caught back up on recent events in her life along with her companions. The next day, she meets with Eliath having learned that she's a longtime friend, who's now unbelievably concerned by what's going on with Nitz's mind, especially since she doesn't remember any of the countless times they've spent together. The two walk through some of the neighborhoods around their houses, whilst also trying to contact their other friends and fill them in on everything. However, they only manage to reach Aldrich and Dorian, the rest not answering their phones at the time or being out of the city due to work. They agree to meet at a local diner in a few hours to discuss things. And with Aldrich being a doctor, so he can possibly determine if Nitsa has any sort of brain trauma / damage, or if it really is a spontaneous occurrence of amnesia, though he's never heard of that ever before. The four of them get together and try to figure things out, starting with Aldrich, Dorian, and Aleath, essentially reintroducing themselves to Nitsa, along with telling them some stories from their history in hopes of jogging her memories back into gear, even slightly, to no avail. Then later, Aldrich conducts a thorough physical examination of her, but can't seem to find anything out of the ordinary. In fact, from his medical perspective, her whole body appears to be extremely healthy. Back at her house, all three of them ask if she wants them to stay the night just to make sure that nothing bad happens and to ease her stress, to which she agrees, having not slept a wink the previous one. During her sleep, however, Nitsa has a very bizarre lucid dream that felt almost too real, as if what was happening in it were actual events that she had lived through, almost like a sort of hybrid between a dream and a memory. Everything was shaded a distorted purplish color, but she could make out that she appeared to be on a large boat, only it wasn't her. She was in someone else's body, seemingly a man. The ship they were on was rocking back and forth, so she assumed it must have been out at sea. In the far distance, what looked like a landmass could be seen, and the moon was shining bright overhead. They were at the front of the ship, performing some kind of odd prayer session or ritual, which ended with them slicing both of their palms using a knife-like object and letting the blood trickle down onto an open book. There were other indistinguishable people on the ship too, but none of them seemed to care about what the man was doing at all. Just as some of the bystanders began walking over to observe the grotesque scene, Nitsa suddenly awakens in a panic, gasping for air, as if she wasn't breathing whilst asleep, and dripping sweat, with a slight pain across both her palms that feels like cuts, but no visible marks or scrapes. In the morning, she brings up the dream to her friends, as it freaked her out immensely, and wonders if they could make some sense of it. None of them have any clue as to what her nightmare, which sounds more correct, could have been about, and are also quite unsettled by the details of it. Aldrich thinks it could possibly help in answering why she's lost her memory, especially since she was also having trouble breathing in the night, and orders an immediate MRI for her brain, scheduled for 4 days from now. For the time being, he recommends that she take things easy until they know the results of the scan, in case it's some sort of brain/cranial damage or obstruction of, like, say, the artery valves and stuff. At this point, I had been researching some amount of, research of physiology, not as much. I had my knowledge of neurology was not as in depth as it is now when I was writing this, but it was later furthered. But I was researching a portion of it, and obviously researching it for the means of this game for just medical practice. Brain/cranial damage or obstruction, which is precisely what she does. Dorian decides to sleep over the next few days to help her readjust to her daily life in Raboka, along with providing some close security in case of an emergency. She asks him what's become of her private investigator career, dumbfounded by how she's only remembering it now, and he confirms that she thankfully still indeed doesn't. Many local police officers actually considered her to be the best detective in the city. This brings a lot of comfort to her, as she doesn't know what would happen if she ever lost that job, and asks when/what her most recent case was, with it having been a missing infant report, unfortunately declaring it a cold case about a week ago. On the night before her scan, Nitsa has another extremely strange dream, or more so a continuation of the previous one, in which the man from before was now off the ship and in what appeared to be a seaside town, with a lot of very small, low-to-the-ground structures resembling houses and other buildings. They must have docked on the landmass that she saw in the last dream, and seemed to have brought goods along with them, but she could see people loading varying sizes of crates off the boat. While walking through the town in this unknown person's body, she notices a lot of extremely bizarre and creepy things happening. Weirdly shaped markings on some of the buildings, statuettes that upon closer inspection appeared to be of a creature with a tentacled face, human body, and jagged wings, plus random people throughout the settlement, twitching in terrifyingly sporadic ways, many achieving inhuman limb movements. Just as she begins heading towards the shoreline, the sun, or what seems to be the sun given everything still being a foggy purple tinge, went black, covering the area in total darkness, and the person started to twitch uncontrollably themselves. Nitsa bolts awake once again, gasping for air, but is able to catch her breath more quickly this time. She has her MRI with the results coming back almost immediately, with help from Aldrich, and unfortunately everything appears to be normal inside her skull. I know that feeling. They go over what to do next, with Aldrich offering up some more tests that can be done, but for now it looks like she'll just have to slowly readjust to her life like how it was before her memory loss. Her friends help her slowly get used to the normal routine, including getting back into the private investigation work. The nightmares keep coming, with more of the same strange things happening in them. A few weeks go by, and Itza is starting to feel more like her old self again, with her career slowly picking back up, now just in a new setting. However, her dreams begin to take a more unpleasant turn, causing her actual physical ailment during the daytime. One night, she has a dream where the still unknown man she's possessing is once again walking through the seaside town. Only this time, the buildings have gotten taller and more are being added to the surrounding area, like it was slowly turning into a small city. It then occurred to Nitsa that these dreams must be taking place in the past, given the amount of pre-modern technologies strung about and the way the people seemed to be dressed, though still blurry and almost indistinguishable. This same dream continued for nights on end, but didn't become truly disturbing until one day while she was on a walk with Bogdana in downtown Barboka, where she notices that some of the buildings looked shockingly similar to the ones in the place from her dreams, as well as the location of the ocean next to the city ma- as well as the location of the ocean next to the city, as well. Yeah, there should have been a that there. That the location of the ocean next to the city matches it exactly. She tries brushing it off at first, as just her mind remembering images of the city that she had seen and transferring them into her dreams. But as they continue walking, it as they continue walking, it became startlingly clear to her that she had never been that she it became startlingly clear to her that she had never been in downtown Barboka before, or at least not that she could remember from the amnesia. So there's no way that she could conclude for her mind to be generating the buildings in her sleep state. Her private investigation business soon picks up again after some help from her friends and timing adjustments, and slowly gaining more clients. However, something freaky begins happening as the months pass, and her customers keep pouring in. Oh, I think I may have to get back to. No. I'm going to stick it out. And read this. I'll get back to where I'm situated later. It's not far from here. People start coming to her with a slew of missing persons reports from all across the city, which also obviously garnered the attention of the local police and media outlets. For the first time in her career, she's completely booked with clients, all with the exact same type of case, telling the rest that unfortunately they'll have to go to the regular police department in the meantime, which very much aggravates her. Over the next few weeks, she begins investigating with usual searches of the victims' homes to see if there's any possible evidence to be gathered, and though nothing seemed suspicious about their belongings, most of them being in their normal places, or according to family/friends, creepily enough, somewhere on all of their properties, she managed to find a very strange symbol etched into either the floor or the wall of their housing. It's shaped like a star, but oddly, the 5 points curved to the right. And what appears to be a tree or bush branch in the center, surrounded by a circle. Each one of the etchings seems to be burnt in some kind of pyrography pen, and all matching together in detail perfectly. Nitsa takes this as her first lead, with the knowledge that these disappearances are connected, and asks the Barboka Police Department for any important information regarding the other cases, including if the same symbol was found at the crime scenes, to which they found that it actually had been. She begins doing research into kidnappings that have been taking place in the city in the past few years to see if there's any similarities or known criminals who specialize at it. To her surprise, there was a huge string of disappearances that happened back in 2013, 2006, 2000, 1991, and 1998, with all the victim reports having started on March 10th and ended on December 8th. This phenomenon didn't just happen in Barboka during these years, but across Nicaragua, especially out in the very rural countryside. And in 2013 and 1991, many of the victims were infants under the age of 4. The Nicaraguan government began taking serious notice of these disappearances in 2006, and even began organizing different posse groups in the rural areas, which are still active to this day, to try and protect farm families. They initially blamed it on the nation's cartels/gangs, but more or less gave up on that theory as the years went on. Or maybe I should state gave up on that. Well, actually, in the story, the government actually doesn't have anything to do with it, or at least what I initially intended. I guess maybe so blames it on them, even though the Nicaraguan government is heavily involved with the Nicaraguan cartels, along with other Central American cartels. All their governments are, as governments of the world are, incredibly corrupt. Whilst reading all this, Nitsa suddenly remembers something startling. Back when she was living in Managua before losing her memory, she was working on some cases of missing infants who seemed to have just up and vanished. She had been trying to gather leads for the cases for about 3 months, from what she recalled, but wasn't able to find anything of much use to her. Seeing as these were the only cases being brought to her right now, and just how unsettling the whole issue is, she decided to take it up as a full-time matter until things calm down or until she's able to solve some of this mystery. Along with this, her dreams simultaneously start becoming more vivid, taking a toll on her mental health, which she also continues looking for answers as to why they're still happening. And as Nitsa delves deeper into investigating these two frightening occurrences, she slowly uncovers an even more terrifying truth. From finding that strange symbol in more places across the city, discovering human body parts along the shoreline, learning that the symbol is called the Eldritch Sign from the Eldritch Sign from a disturbing old book titled the Necronomicon, which she had apparently already previously checked out at the library, interrogating a 66-year-old alcoholic man by the name of Zadok Alaman, Nicaraguan, who claims to have fought off demons in the sea, talking with her mother after finally arriving for a visit about some of their family history, including of her estranged ninth great grandfather, who was the first of their ancestors to arrive in Nicaragua, having continually lived in Braboca when it was first settled in the 1600s, researching the history of the city going back to its colonialization by the English, with its original name being Innsmouth, experiencing horribly realistic hallucinations during the day, and being stalked by a mysterious figure who she can never seem to catch, all whilst her bizarre dreams persist in the night, with a new blurry figure she possesses emerging, who appears to be a female, one that seems oddly familiar. Settings: Managua, Nicaragua, Braboca, Nicaragua, the Nicaraguan countryside, Braboca, Nicaragua. Just to clarify, Braboca, Nicaragua is not a real place. I completely made it up. I set it along what is known as the Mosquito Coast corridor of geographically in Nicaragua's landscape on the east coast of the country. It's a made-up city. It's not real. And its former name is, what it was called, deemed by the English when the colonists came over to the country, Innsmouth. Your settings: 2013, 2022, 2000, 2022. The Shadow Out of Time, adapted from The Shadow Out of Time, The Shadow over Innsmouth, and Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Language of the game: Spanish. And okay, so this last one, this was the one I was in process of writing. It's very small font, but sorry, little spider. I don't know hope you landed safely. This was the one I was in the process of writing while I was still in Toronto, along with revising my 10th game. So I have not finished it yet. It is incomplete. So here we go with just this. 17th game, the title is The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. Story. 4 years after moving away from Northern Ireland to study abroad, 26-year-old gender-fluid Roland Quigley, Northern Irish, have been living a very... I need better light. Okay, yeah, I'll be able to see it. I have to get really close to this. Have been living a very fulfilling life in downtown Pristina, as a fairly well-known pornographic actor, earning an incredibly generous income off of the job. Since Roland's late teenage years, the prospect of going into the adult film industry started intriguing them heavily, as they always had been more sexually promiscuous than most of their peers, which only intensified upon gaining more and more independence. So much... No, this is not a stand-in character. So much so that while studying in Serbia, they were offered a job working for a porn studio in Kosovo. And after finishing all of their post-secondary courses, decided to take it because they thought it would be a fun career, as well as to... God. Hold on. What's my phone at? Furnace room, yet again, because why the hell not? Okay, gotta go fast with this. So, continuing off of The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, pornographic actor. Sounds like I already read that. Serbia, job working for a porn studio in Kosovo. And after finishing all their post-secondary courses, decided to take it because they thought it would be a fun career, as well as the pay being extremely high. Once they settled into their new home in the capital city of Pristina, Roland got acquainted with some of the other actors they would be working with, as they got to know them as people and how the industry treated them. Also to make things feel less awkward on set, seeing as they had never been filmed during sex before. They had told their parents, who still lived in Northern Ireland, that they were starting a career in pornography before moving to Kosovo. And though not overly thrilled with the news of their only child becoming a sex worker, the two of them respected their decision. Let me turn on another light. Hold on. Okay, hopefully that'll help. A sex worker, the two of them respected their decision and said that they weren't ashamed of it, which made Roland extremely happy to hear. After about 8 film shoots of one-on-one intimacy, they started feeling more comfortable with being filmed and actually were able to fully enjoy themselves, eventually working their way up to an array of different sex acts, becoming better at each type too. As of current, Roland was keeping in check with their now typical routine. Wake up, do some stuff around the house, Some days film at the studio, some days film on their own, some days go out for a while, relax, and go to sleep. Along with planning for an up-and-coming road trip into Montenegro with a few of their actor friends. Overall, living a very luxuriously chill life. Until one night, when Roland has a very bizarre dream, in which they open their eyes only to wake up in the middle of a dark, thickly wooded forest, and are feeling extremely cold. They get up and walking aimlessly around, trying to find some sort of path or road to follow that can lead them to civilization. As they're walking, they wonder where exactly they are. They are out loud. To which, out of nowhere, a deep raspy voice replies, "Russia," startling them in the process. Upon looking around and seeing nobody, the disembodied voice tells them that they're in the Arctic heart of the Russian wilderness, and must find a large stone monolith hidden in the thick brush if they want the dream to end. After realizing after realizing that they can't do anything else but walk, which is unusual for them, as they're most often quite good at controlling their dreams. Randal decides to obey them as their most I got lost there. Obey the instructions, just to hopefully wake up from what seemed to be more of a nightmare given the voice's unsettling tone and the creepy, darkened woods. After following a set of strangely shaped trees, they eventually find the monolith in a small clearing and are unnerved by how it's built. It's very tall and slender with two diverging sharp points at the top, plus a series of bizarre markings running all across its surface. The voice tells... Oh, yep, I really need to edit this. There's a lot of grammatical mistakes and, continuity errors. The voice tells Randal that in order to wake up, they'll have to stick one of their hands in a large hole on top of the monolith. They're extremely suspicious of this, but figure that nothing bad would really happen, seeing as it's just a dream. So upon finally reaching the top, they hold out. Upon finally reaching the top, their hands. That's nothing. They hold onto the monolith with one hand and slowly stick. They hold onto the monolith with one hand and slowly stick the other hand in, which once fully inside, it clamps down hard, causing them excruciating pain. Randal screams in agony as it presses harder, feeling it puncture all of the skin on their arm. But just as the bones feel as though they're going to break, they wake up from the dream, flailing about in bed. The next day comes and they go about it as per usual. However, despite their distracting tasks, Randal can't help but keep thinking about the strange dream from the night before, so much so that it even makes them lose focus during filming. They talk with some of their close friends over lunch about it, and they actually find the whole thing really cool and interesting, saying things like they've never had a dream like that before, as well as telling Randal to not overanalyze it because they'll probably never have it again anyway. They take their advice and try to forget it, as they probably wouldn't have another one like it. That night, they go to sleep a bit earlier than usual, and they're feeling remarkably more drowsy, than what's normal for them at the time. But just as they begin falling into a peaceful slumber, another bizarre dream happens with the same unsettling voice. They find themselves standing in a black void with some strange spots of color scattered around. The voice welcomes them to what it calls the soul breach, then introduces itself as a being greater as a being of greater knowledge known as Nyarlathotep, the keeper of this realm, the keeper of this realm, who can manipulate the fabric of time and space, along with having the ability to manifest himself in any living creature's dreams. He tells Randal that he has chosen them to give knowledge of untold secrets of their universe and beyond, showing them things that he warns might very well be too much for their feeble mind to handle. But unfortunately, they will have no choice in the matter. They don't care much for what this Nyarlathotep person is telling them, as all of this is just a dream. So they decide to go along with it until they wake up on their own. As Randal brushes his words aside, Nyarlathotep starts laughing at them menacingly, like he knows something that they don't, unsettling and annoying them by doing so. He tells them that they will begin the journey with them having to find an old book titled the Necronomicon from a middle-aged man named Harley Warren, Northern Irish, who lives in a large house in the suburbs of Belfast, Northern Ireland. He's in the downtown area on his way back home from a meeting. They must follow him and get inside. Just as Nyarlathotep stops talking, some sort of terror suddenly appears in the surrounding blackness of the voids, spilling bright light out from it. He then instructs them to walk through it to begin their journey, which they willingly obey. After stepping through to the other side, Randal opens their eyes to find themselves back in their childhood home city of Belfast, being born and raised there right up until leaving for Serbia. It's the downtown area that they remember very well, having gone on countless walks around the exact spot as a teenager. Nyarlathotep tells them that they'll need to locate Henry somewhere. God, I hate the font that I have to print this in. Henry, somewhere near here. He's white-skinned, has brown eyes, short gray and black hair, with a green sweater, blue jeans, black shoes, and gray trench coat on. He's out grocery shopping at the moment. As Randal starts searching the local area, they ask Nyarlathotep about why exactly he wants them to find this book of Harley's, to which he replies that the Necronomicon is an ancient book of knowledge meant to be forbidden to humankind. It was written by a man from what is now modern day Yemen, named Abdul al-Hazarad. Who, there are a lot of typos in this, who had learned the maddening secrets of the universe, revealing truths unfit for mortal beings, God, of the world. Now hundreds of copies exist all across the globe for any naively curious fellow to dare read. They don't understand what any of this means at all, but once again go along with it, seeing as it's just a dream. They keep looking and soon enough locate Harley, leaving one of the stores and promptly following him all the way back to his house, and is quickly able to find a way inside. They see him in one of the rooms, but doesn't seem to notice them. Nyarlathotep responds to this by saying that their physical matter was cloaked after walking through the portal, so nobody can see, hear, or feel them. Randal finds it unusually strange that this dream voice has some form of logic behind them, not being noticed. Logic behind not being noticed by people. But then something startling occurred to them, which they somehow didn't seem to realize earlier. Everything in the dream feels real, extremely real. The floor, the walls, a window, a doorknob, etc. Each one feels authentic, as if it were actually there in front of them. This creeps them out quite a bit, and they question Nyarlathotep about it. But all he does is laugh in a very mocking way. and see and says that deep down they know what is happening. All their reminded just their mind just hasn't accepted it yet, much to Randal's annoyance. Arlie walks into another room, presumably to the garage from the looks of it, and Randal begins searching the house for the book. Whilst doing so, they decide to ask Nyarlathotep why this man has a copy of the Necronomicon, seeing as it supposedly contains forbidden knowledge. To which he replies that Mr. Warren is a historian who works at a museum in the city that just so happens to have a few specific objects with a relation to things mentioned in the dastardly book. He himself, however, is trying to unlock answers as to how the world will truly end hidden amongst its cryptic pages. This makes him feel very uneasy and tries pushing Nyarlathotep to tell them more about this mention of the end of the world. But he just laughs maniacally. He just laughs menacingly once again without saying a word. Once again annoying them greatly. It's fine. Okay. Still going. Once again annoying them greatly. After searching room to room for a few minutes, they finally find the Necronomicon in what appears to be a city office. Seems to be a study office of some sort. It's set on a large book stand and open to a page that had a drawing of what appeared to be a giant mound of tentacles attached to a gelatinous looking body with 6 eyes and eight mouths. The thing was absolutely hideous in how it was displayed, and upon reading some of the paragraphs, began to freak Roland out. Nyarlathotep explains that the thing on the page is a being called Yog-Sothoth, otherwise known as the Keeper of Ways, that exists between the veils of time and space. He is a creature of immense knowledge, able to tell everything everything that was, is, and will be. Everything that was, is, and will be. Many humans have attempted opening portals to contact him in search of great intellectual powers, but only one has ever been able to fully enter his dimension and live. A man by the name of Wilbur Whately, American. Though he is far beyond human now. He resides in a delirious place called, I guess, I don't know why I used the word, I'm sure it was, he resides in a delirious place called Unknown Kadath. It's a realm beyond all known realities, of which even the most powerful of chaotic gods don't have any knowledge as to where it is in existence. That is, except for Nyarlathotep, the only being who knows its true location. Roland asks what is this mysterious place, to which Nyarlathotep laughs and says they will know soon enough, as they'll be going to Unknown Kadath too. By this point, these cryptic answers have made Roland quite angry and starts demanding that they tell them what this Unknown Kadath place is. But Nyarlathotep cuts them off and tells them to turn the book 11 pages to the right and read the paragraphs. However, they protest, and they've had enough of all this random nonsense, and decides to wake themselves up. He laughs and reiterates that they can't wake up unless they do exactly what he says, but he's more than willing to let them try if they please. They attempt to wake up by closing their eyes and focusing on the thought. It doesn't work, no matter how hard they try. They then start physically hurting themselves in hopes of triggering the senses to wake them up to no avail, which scares them as it's a dream. Their subconscious shouldn't be this weak against their own mind. Well, that's not exactly true, but in essence. as they think that their subconscious shouldn't be this weak against their own mind, even though subconscious is part of it. They have no expertise in dreaming, but know that it shouldn't be behaving like this. They soon give in to his demands and turn to the page. He says. On it, there's a bunch of text. Talking about the cosmos and something that seems to be called the crawling chaos, as well as drawings of what appears to be a tall worm-like creature with a long flexible pointed head, no eyes, a big gaping mouth, no teeth, no arms, two arms, three sharp fingers on each, and three hooved legs in a triangle shape on its body. Roland is deeply disturbed by the thing and asks Nyarlathotep what it is, to which he reveals that the creature in the drawing is him, in his true physical form. They read the page, and it says that he's an extremely powerful entity, an extremely powerful entity who has the ability to phase into people's minds as well as control their dreams. He's also a highly dangerous being with a malevolent personality, often tricking helpless creatures into committing heinous acts: murder, suicide, rape, torture, mutilation, genocide, etc. They're completely disgusted by absolutely everything the book says about him, and Nyarlathotep starts taunting them with some of the most gruesome things he's done to Earthlings over the centuries, laughing maniacally at his actions. To which Randal throws it down and then frantically tries to find a way out of the house, no longer wanting to listen to this thing's orders. But just as they start tugging at a window latch, the entire room begins violently spinning to a point where they nearly vomit. Then everything around them goes completely dark, and within a few seconds they jolt awake, very startled, trying to figure out what just happened, but quickly calm the panic, telling themselves that it was just another really strange dream. The next day at the studio, Randal attempts to focus their mind on having good sex and being arousing for the camera, but they can't stop thinking about that dream from the night before, which does affect their performance a little bit. After finishing all the shoots and going to clean up, some of their co-workers / friends ask if everything's all right, as they notice they didn't seem very into it on set. Roland responds by saying they didn't have a good sleep last night, as they've just been stewing over some stuff recently, not being entirely false, but reassures them that it's nothing to worry about. The group decides to go out for dinner at a nearby cafe in the later evening, and Randal starts to relax a little more as they all talk about work, food, life in general, the up-and-coming road trip, politics, some of them even practicing flirting with each other for future videos together. But whilst in the middle of conversation, Roland glances out a window and catches something odd from the corner of their eye. Standing underneath a brightly lit streetlight is a thin, tall man wearing a crimson-red coat, black pants, boots, and leather gloves, just staring at them with a creepy closed-mouth smile on his face. Okay, it's fine. Yeah, it's not going to be too much longer, okay. Not blinking at all. They try to ignore his creepy presence, but for some reason, their attention keeps being drawn to him, almost like there is some kind of force pulling their gaze out the window. The whole time, he never makes even the slightest of movements. After staring back at the man for another uncomfortable moment, they notice him slowly raise his hand and raise his right his right arm up and reach inside his coat, seemingly to grab something. He keeps it in for a few seconds, then begins pulling out what appears to be a book of some kind, but they can't quite make out what the cover looks like. Upon focusing more closely, Randal's blood runs cold with fear when they're finally able to see that the book he's holding is the Necronomicon from the bizarre dream last night. Exact same design, size, and color. As they stare, water flowing through a pipe. As they stare at it, utterly speechless, all sense of reality seems to drift away for a brief moment. That is until they look at the man's face and notice that he now has a very wide open-mouthed smile stretching from cheek to cheek. The two lock eyes, and Randal suddenly starts hearing voices from every side of them, saying words that they can't seem to fully understand, and their vision slowly begins going completely black, except for around the man, whose entire body appears to be glowing with an eerie red light, which was getting brighter by the second. It glows so intense that it feels like it's going to blind them. But just as their eyes start to be consumed by the redness, they hear one of their friends calling out their name and almost immediately snap back to reality, trying to analyze what just happened. The entire group is staring at Randal, and some of them ask if they're okay, as they were just blankly gazing at that man across the street for about 5 minutes. To which they reply that they're fine, just feeling a little tired and must have zoned out for a bit because of it. However, they do ask the rest of the group if anything weird was going on while they were looking out the window, and all of them pretty well simultaneously answered with a no. Then ask what they mean by weird, but Randal decides not to tell anyone about what they saw, in fear of sounding crazy, saying to forget about it. They glance back at the window for a second and sees the man without any glowing red light turn his body and walk slowly down the sidewalk out of sight, which gives them a very uneasy feeling in their stomach, not really wanting to leave the cafe in fear that he might be lurking out there somewhere. The group wraps up their evening gathering with almost total darkness covering the city by this point. And as they're all getting ready to leave, Randal asks one of their friends if they wouldn't mind walking home together, living just a few blocks away from each other, as it would make them feel more safe, to which they agree. They get home without running into the creepy man and tries to calm themselves down from that disturbing occurrence, still not being able to find any sort of rational explanation for what happened other than it all being some sort of strange hallucination. But even that didn't make much sense, as they've hallucinated before on drugs and alcohol. Well, combination of alcohol highly unlikely to cause hallucination. I need to change that, or makes the combination of drugs and alcohol. They had hallucinated before on drugs and substance use. It's been felt, and it's never felt as real as that experience did. They hadn't even been drinking at any point that evening. They ponder over it for a few hours, but eventually decide to turn in for the night, as lack of sleep won't do them much good if it was their mind playing tricks on them. Figuring the whole issue should be easier to solve after getting some rest, Randal heads to bed, trying not to think about the man or the book or the red light or any of it, and begins to feel relaxed again. But just as they drift off into sleep, suddenly they find themselves standing in the same black void from the previous night, along with the sickly familiar voice of Nyarlathotep welcoming them back. They start panicking heavily, frantically trying to wake up, to no avail, which he slowly laughs maniacally at, taunting their attempts at consciousness, until eventually they yell at him to stop and get out of their head. But he then begins mocking them with a pitiful tone, saying how how much he thought they missed him. After all, they seemed to be entranced by his little performance earlier. Randall asks what exactly he means by performance, but he just keeps laughing and tells them to think about it for a minute, saying that it should come to mind easily as they saw him only a few hours ago. They take a second to gather their thoughts, then suddenly they're overwhelmed with an intense sense of fear as they remember the creepy man standing outside the cafe, to which Nyarlathotep congratulates them and says he was surprised by how mesmerized they were at the sight of the Yklynafok. That's another. That one I made up for any of you Lovecraft fans. I made that one up. The Yklynafok in his human form. Most mortal beings start screaming at the slightest glimpse of it. Most mortal beings start screaming at the slightest glimpse of it. Staring at it for too long can drive some insane. They ask what they're trying to pronounce the best they can is. And he replies that it is the bright light that was being emitted from his body. Most often, it's the only thing that a creature can focus on, even if it causes them excruciating pain, with the rest of their vision becoming consumed by total darkness. Randall begins arguing that none of what he's saying can be true. This is just a dream. The voice calling itself Nyarlathotep isn't some all-powerful entity from beyond the stars, and it can't manifest into a physical form in the real world disguised as a human male. It's utterly impossible. But he simply snickers with malicious delight at these conclusions they've made, and asks them if they are confident in this reasoning, to which they respond with a bit of shakiness in tone, yes, as it's the only logical explanation, therefore it must be correct. He is just a figment of their imagination. Yet, we're fine. Figment of their imagination. There's a brief moment of silence until all of a sudden Randall is propelled upward into the blackened voids, propelled upward from the blackened void's ground, or the closest thing to solid ground in this place, at a rate so fast that the skin begins to break off from their body, exposing bone in certain areas, whilst a deafeningly loud and horrific roar of some animal or creature can be heard via every direction, causing their skull to feel like it's going to split in half. They scream in unbelievable agony as their eyelids begin to bleed. Then out of absolutely nowhere, they're slammed face first into some sort of invisible force, almost like concrete, with the impact shattering almost all their teeth, dislocating their jaw and breaking their right arm, nose, and right foot. They try to lift themselves up despite the unbearable pain, but they're once again whisked back down through the void at an even faster rate than before, this time being thrown into what appears to be a giant wall of purple fire. The flames burn Randall's flesh to a crisp, and in a moment they were certain it was going to kill them. But just as quickly as it started, the fire disappears, with their body hitting the bottom of the void, causing even more bones to break in the process. They feel incredibly dizzy and nauseous, then notice a large pool of blood forming underneath them. They'll barely even let out a whisper, as everything on their face felt numb. Out of nowhere, they hear Nyarlathotep ask in a deep growling tone if the pain feels real to them, to which Randall clarifies, to which Randall carefully attempts to nod their head yes, with tears streaming down out of their eyes. He then simply replies with good, and a loud snap sound is heard throughout the darkness. Suddenly, all the damage done to Randall's body is completely healed. Within an instant, every single cut, bruise, fracture, and what was its broken bone is fixed. Sensation comes back to their limbs. Their teeth are perfectly intact. Their skin Their skin was its natural color once more. The pool of blood that surrounded them was gone. The unbearable pain that they endured had been totally lifted from their body. It was almost as if nothing had even had occurred. Nothing had even occurred. They stand up, still shaking from the experience, and ask in a trembling voice what just happened to them. And Nyarlathotep replies that his powers of physical and mental manipulation are stronger than anything their pitiful naive mind can possibly imagine. At least at the moment, that is, for the will open their eyes to what most of humanity is continuously blind to. That is, except for a select few throughout the eons who have ventured too far to find meaning or reason amidst chaotic wonderment. They start shouting profanities at the top of their lungs, demanding he stop with the wordplay and give them actual answers that make sense. But instead, he goes quiet for a moment, then asks them a question regarding the term sense, then says that to them, what they are going through is unfathomably illogical, but to him everything is perfectly logical. So by this notion, he has already given them a proper explanation. They're completely confused by what he's saying and ask what that means. To which Nyarlathotep replies with, "There is always an answer to the unknowable, whether or not a creature's mind can comprehend the revelation. Therefore, just because they cannot figure out why or what something is does not mean there is no explanation for it. And if one's attempts at reasoning are unable to identify the correct constellation, I think I should have used the correct correlation or constellation, the correct source, then perhaps what they have grown to believe is logical regarding that thing is a lie." He then says to Randal that part of what is a lie. He then says to Randal that part of what's happening to them, however, is very much logical from the perspective of human understanding. He is surprised they haven't been able to realize it already, as the two had just been discussing it right before their little flying lesson, telling them to think on it a little more. They anxiously ponder over their whole situation for a minute, but get frustrated as they still can't figure out what he's trying to say. Nyarlathotep goes... Yeah, fine. That's the last page. Goes quiet once again for a brief moment, then in a deep, malevolent voice simply says, that was an awful lot of pain you were in, wasn't it? Randal is puzzled by what exactly he's asking, as yes, they were indeed in a tremendous amount of sheer agony, which he obviously already knew the answer to. But just then, the terrifying realization hits them full force, that being, if they're able to feel pain and touching the ground or whatever it is they're standing on with the physical sensation of its presence, then going by Nyarlathotep's philosophy, everything happening right now must in fact be real, not a dream. This newfound reasoning causes them to start having a massive panic attack that nearly makes them faint, but just before they lose consciousness, another loud snap sound rings out throughout the void, and suddenly most of their body overcome with completely relaxed feeling, along with their behavior, though still being extremely afraid internally, which Nyarlathotep reveals is due to his almighty manipulating abilities. He laughs at their misery, saying that it took them long enough to figure out the truth, adding that he could sense deep down in the corners of their mind they knew all of it to be real the moment they saw his demonstration of power outside of the cafe, and asked them if he's correct in his assumption. Randal pauses briefly to think it over, then sighs in defeat, and as they validate his theory, considering the fact that their whole perception of reality has been utterly destroyed. But quickly begins shouting at him again, because he still hasn't explained why he's doing all this to them, other than mentioning some journey he's going to take them on, and spouting cryptic gibberish. Nyarlathotep once again starts laughing at their dismay, and just tells them that all desired knowledge for the undesirable will be revealed in time. But for now, they must continue that their very trek. They must continue that very trek that he has been speaking of. As he recalls, they attempted to flee from his scavenger hunt game at Warren's house the previous night. They start to say something back at him in agitation, but just as the first words leave their mouth, another terror in the surrounding blackness appears, exactly like the last time they were here. Once again, with blindingly bright light coming from the other side, Nyarlathotep urges them forward, and Randal begrudgingly accepts the fact that they'll have to obey his commands if they want to awaken from this horror show, at least for now. They take some quick breaths, then they step through the tear, nearly tripping as the light causes them to clamp their eyes shut. Upon fully exiting it, they look around to find. Okay, I don't know if that's just something around it there. Upon fully exiting it, they look around to find that they're in what appears to be a populous area of yet another city, with the majority of its inhabitants being of Arab skin color and wearing clothes that look as though they are tied to Islamic culture. The streets are bustling with cars, and the sky appears to be just getting to the point of sunset, as hues of pinkish purple coloring illuminate the clouds above. They stammer slightly whilst trying to get their bearings, as the warm shades from above stretch across the landscape, seeming to almost hypnotize them for a brief moment, it being a sight more beautiful than anything they've ever seen in their life. Then Nyarlathotep's voice slowly chimes out of nowhere once more, causing Randal to flinch and become overwhelmed with dreadfulness. And that is all I have written down for the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath so far. And the city that they walked out into was Ramallah, Palestine, the capital and largest city of Palestine. Okay, I've really got to wrap this up and get going. So I'll explain more of this at some point in the future, like my thought process behind making these stories, writing them as video games. The two other stories I was going to do was an adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness was going to be my 18th game. And I wanted to do an adaptation of Michael Eden's. I wanted to do an adaptation of The Neverending Story by the German author, I think initials M.E. It's one of my favorite books. Back when I read it, I thought this would make a great video game. I'll get into more of that at a different time. But yeah, so the other two would have been At the Mountains of Madness, and my last one, the 19th game, would have been my attempted adaptation of The Neverending Story. So, yeah, okay, I gotta go. I have no clue how I'm going to edit this and how I'm going to upload it. So, I hope you enjoyed. Please share your feedback if you have any criticisms. If you despise them outright, like fully despise them, tell me. If you love them, you can tell me. If not, you do whatever you want to do. I'm going to go eat something at a restaurant right now with some people.